Welcome to Walk in the Park.
Thank you.
Together with Jon Kåre Stene,
Yep.
co-founder of Skyfall, early stage investment company in Norway, and also earlier co-founder of one of the unicorns, Norwegian unicorns at some point. Let's walk. First question I usually ask is how often do you actually have walk and talks in your life?
I do sometimes, but more often I have run and talks.
Yeah.
So I really like to invite interesting people and good friends to just run out in the forest, especially at these times when it's dark and you have your headlamp on. Finding paths in the forest, that's one of my favorites. And then I know it's some kind of meditative effect when being outside, and always very good conversations.
So when and how did you start this tradition of running and talking?
No, I think it's a consequence of just like to stay in shape and like to run, and especially run in the forest. And I think getting a lot of kids and a busy job and just a busy life, then it's a good way to connect with people that you don't get to see that often in other places. So it's a nice win-win effect, hanging out with great people and nice friends and staying in shape.
Is it a part of a culture in Skyfall as well, or is it your personal with your friends?
I think that's more personal with my friends. We actually have a weekly training session together with the whole team. Each Wednesday, we, in a way, as a team building event, we have a pretty hard strength hour with strength training. So that's part of the same, staying in shape, but also conversating. I think in a way you build a strong connection and strong tight bonds when you're suffering together. So it's
Tell us more about yourself. So who are you and what do you do?
well, my name is Jon Kåre. I currently work in Skyfall Ventures, which is an Oslo-based pre-seed seed stage investment fund. But when I describe myself in the professional manner, I like to say I started to work in Schibsted, a Norwegian media company, back in 2006, and really experienced the force of software and technology and how it was able to disrupt the media industry. Also saw the teams actually disrupting all the incumbents, that the boundaries for new teams and startups to rise and build fantastic products and challenge massive behemoths were suddenly much easier. So in a way I experienced my first work years in a business that got disrupted by technical rebels, and that inspired me to start Kolonial.no, which is now Oda, together with 9 other co-founders, where I think none of us had experience in the grocery industry, and Oda is an e-commerce grocery company, but we had all seen the power of software and technology and the patterns that we've recognized in other industries. I think we early on saw that force could be applied in almost any industry, and that was what embarked us over to become like these software technical rebels disrupting the grocery industry in Norway. Also a lot of the experience you do as a founder in that setting, and especially back in 2013, 2014, where the ecosystem around startups were almost non-existing. It was in a lot of interesting things that was starting to grow up, or to be established, but it was kind of lonely, and that also made us reflect that there's something missing here, and those acknowledgements also led into us creating Skyfall Ventures, which in a way also has been a founder journey in itself.
Let's go back to, again, Kolonial and Oda and how you started. So 9 co-founders. How did you get the idea and how was the beginning of your journey?
No, I think the interesting part of being 10 co-founders is that all of us had our story into what became kolonial.no in 2013. But for my part, it was a combination of working in Schibsted, seeing what you could do with technology, combined with a massive aversion of going to the grocery store. So it was, in a way, a truly felt problem that I wanted to contribute to fix. So for my part, it was actually a September evening, Friday, September evening at the ICA grocery store, Bislett, where I was really tired after a long week, and it was, for my part, just some puzzles that came together, and so it has to be possible to get these groceries home in a different way. This was in 2007, and it took six years until we established the company. So it's been a long journey. I've been reflecting a lot on how did Oda become what it became. In the same, tried to see it related to the Skyfall journey as well, and in a way try to see is there a pattern there? Are you able to create a blueprint on how do you go from these ideas and create a team together with others? And I think for my part, it was just you start to have an idea, you can't put it away, so you talk about the idea with a lot of people. In a way, you're open your mind to notice everything around you that has something to do with that idea. For the journey of Oda, I have one of my best friends is also one of the best friends of Carl Munthe-Kaas, who was the CEO when we started the company and for many years. And when he heard about this concept, he just said that this is something that I'm going to do. And going backward, I've been reflecting. I talked about this concept with a lot of, maybe 100 people. But when Fredrik, my friend, and Carl talked about it, that was in a way what ignited the spark for Carl to do it. And I think we would never be here without him. And he was in a way the driving force in order to make Oda happen, of course together with a strong co-founding team. But it's been just that constant grinding, and I think the importance of daring to start to articulate an idea, visualizing it, don't stop thinking about it, but then also don't rush. So just make sure you take one step every day towards something. It's not easy always it's very hard to see where the path will go. But if you just believe the process, good things will happen. And so I think that was part of it. And also it was a challenge to do something really cool. And I think also we saw that both in getting the co-founding team together, the power of the ambition about doing something really cool and create something that means a lot to a lot of people is just a really powerful source in itself.
So what the feeling you got when you actually started the company and you got your first 100 customers?
No, it's two things that I think I remember the first time we all met, the team of 10. Then Carl and Vegard had been working to gather a team for a couple of years, and 1st of May we gathered the whole team for the first time, and that was in a way the night, 1st of May 2013, that was the night that we decided, okay, let's go. And it was this magical feeling, and it's this aspect of energy. But I just remember walking into the office we had at that time, meeting these people, and you can in a way touch the energy in the air. You can feel that everyone was so aligned on this is what we really want to do. We're aligned on the way we want to do it. This is a really high ambition. We want to do it with operational excellence, we want to like hit the ball out of the ballpark. So I think that's a feeling that I will never forget. And as an investor, that's also a feeling you're trying to sense, is this feeling present in the teams that you're investing? So that was like one part I remember from very early on. And the other is, it's talking about customers. In our backend system, we had this bell that went off for every order that came in. And I just remember we sat there and said, just think about the day that we have to turn off this bell because it's going off constantly. And at that time, it just seemed like a real stretch to actually get there. But I think if you would have that bell now, it would like go off constantly. So we turned it off faster than we thought as well. So it's something magical, both to be part of a team where you feel that the energy and I think the purpose to really make a difference ties you together. Mm-hmm. And also being on a crazy journey. It's I think that's one of the things we say to companies, to startups: just get out there and get customers as fast as possible, because that's when you really start to learn, and that's when the fun starts. It could be pretty challenging. As I said, it's very often it's frustrating when you don't get that traction, when you don't get the customers on board. But I'll promise you, when you get the customers on board and when traction comes, that's the really challenging part. But then again, that's when you're really in the war fight.
Talking about transition from Oda into Skyfall. So about your personal kind of pivot. So you started at Skyfall Ventures while you still were at Oda. And then actually you became more active at some point at Skyfall. So tell us about that transition.
The first concept of Skyfall, or when we started in Oda or Colonial, the first year we worked for free, so we had some side hustles, and I had a side hustle with a consultancy company called Sprint Consulting. And then that's also funny, talking about like the energy and instant love feeling in a way. When I met the partners in Sprint, they wanted to hire me, and I said, sorry, I'm going on a journey here, so I can't take a job as a consultant, but it was just something I really want to work with these guys. And the first idea of Skyfall came at the Christmas table in 2014, where we the background from the Sprint founders also came from business to business SaaS back in the .com days, so they had also been founders, and I think we have a very strong entrepreneurial spirit. And we saw that something was missing, and we wanted, in a way, how can we play a part? And we also experienced a bit with what should Skyfall be. We did some different experiments, but then over time it's all like we did some investments, and the word out on the street came, and other startups heard that we did invest in startups, so the snowball kept rolling. And in 2016, we established a company, and Espen was hired as the manager of the company. And from that time, like, Skyfall was in a way my hobby number one, and in pretty challenging. Okay, when you're in a startup, it's really narrow focus on the job that has to be done, and you're in a way caught by the moment, so you just have to keep on grinding, getting the job done. So for me to get, in a way, some a bubble where you can think about totally different stuff was really interesting. And then I think I saw there that even though, like, you're building Oda, which is an e-commerce grocery company with logistics and food, you saw that there's so many similarities in building a company when it comes to recruiting, it comes to strategy, it comes to prioritizing, it comes to building culture and all this stuff. And suddenly you notice that, the experience I've gained, both from Schibsted, but especially from the Oda journey, were so relevant for a lot of the founders that we've invested in. And in a way, you start to build a bit confidence that, oh, I actually have something to contribute with outside also Oda. And then again, I think for me, there was always an underlying thought that it would be really cool if we could build Skyfall as a company where I could be employed at one time. So I think that was also underlying there. But I think the big transition for me came in 2021. We got SoftBank and Prosus as investors in Oda. I had, in a way, given away more and more responsibilities along the years, and felt in a way a bit empty because there were people around me that were better to doing the job than what I felt I was. They were more motivated, and I said, okay, it's a dangerous place to be here, not being as motivated as I should. And then I started, okay, what should be the next? And it became very obvious that I really loved working with the incredible founders that we invested in through Skyfall and the companies that Espen were in contact with. And I think for me, as a very curious person, it's a good match. Also working as a VC, I hope and feel that I have something to contribute with, both to our portfolio companies, but I hope I also can inspire and be to help for other founders as well. But it felt meaningful, and at the same time, I think I saw that what Espen had built was also a really strong foundation to build something really cool out of Skyfall Ventures. And I think we like to. It's our own investment company. We've been able to build trust from investors that they trust us in allocating their money to the right founders. I think we have a very entrepreneurial founder perspective of building Skyfall Ventures as well. And I think that combination, by satisfying my curiosity and a bit impatience, and I love being all over the place. And I think that's really cool when you have 40 portfolio companies you can work with, because I think we can build Skyfall to a really important and really cool financial company, fueling innovators, fueling growth. I think I think a lot about how do we build the new Norway post oil and gas, and I think founders plays a crucial role in that job, and to be able to both make sure it's capital available for these founders, but also be there to, in a way, trigger them, motivate them to support people that have very, very ambitious plans, and also knowing that it's actually possible to be a founder team with not that much experience, with naive thoughts, with big dreams, and actually succeed.
Is it an advantage of being a naive founder, you think?
Yep. No, well, I think it's an advantage to have some naive people within the team. But then again, if you look around and all examples in the world, and especially in these days where you have the Mag 7 as the largest tech companies in the world driving the global economy, and if you see where they came from small teams with super ambitious founders, and I think it's possible, and the proofs that it is possible, they're out there. And I like to compare it with athletes. In Norway, we never question if someone wants to play in Manchester City or become the world champion in some sports or win Olympic medals. I think we have to acknowledge it's really hard. But and maybe it's a bit naive, but what we see is it's these people that both dare to dream big and also really understand what does it take. This constantly grinding curiosity, almost like they're never resting. They're always looking for what's the right process, what's the right activities, what do we really have to do. And I think a lot of people would like maybe call me naive, but then again, when you meet these people with this dream, with these abilities, and the grit and the curiosity to actually pursue it, I mean, the world is full of examples. And I think that that's an interesting aspect. Very often when experts and historians try to predict the future, they too often forget about the innovators. But when you actually see who has brought prosperity and welfare and pushed the living standards of humanity forward, it's the innovators. So
how do you find the superstar founders?
How do we find them? Just communication, storytelling. For me, being invited to talk with you, it's really important to just let people know that there are investors out there looking for these massively ambitious people. So that's an important part. As I said, it could feel very lonely to embark on that journey. Very often these people have the ability to get safe jobs with high salaries. They're not choosing the easiest path. So one thing is to try to be out there in the different channels and also talking to people. I think I have a concept of talking about like tips to founders. Steve Jobs said in like his epic speech at Stanford, it explained this concept about connecting the dots. And I think that's also when I try to rewind, how did Oda become Oda? How did Skyfall become Skyfall? It's very easy to see. You can say it's coincidence, but it's not. It's easy to connect the dots. But looking forward could be a bit frustrating because it's not that easy to connect the dots looking forward. But what do you need to connect something? You need a lot of dots. So I think for me, it's what I know I can do. I can't connect the dots going forward, but I can create a lot of dots. So that's in my mindset when I wake up every morning. How many dots can I create today? This is a dot. Taking coffee with someone, reading an article, connecting with someone on LinkedIn, or just lift someone and tell them how impressed you're by their what they're doing. And I think for me, and that's some of the learnings I've done from this reflection, is like one thing is to dare to describe your long-term vision. What are you aiming for? I think if you describe it, you start to reprogram your brain in order to actually be aware of things that if you hadn't been that, if you hadn't done that job by like preparing your mind for it, it would just pass away in a very hectic world with a lot of impressions. But then also do one thing every day. Create the dots along the way and believe the process that it will be connected somehow. And I think looking backwards, as being younger, I really had this strong wish internally that I wanted to start something. I want to, like, you feel constant FOMO. You just want to get out there and start, but you don't know what or don't know with who. And I think for me now, reflecting on what I've done, to just, okay, you have to be clear on your long-term perspectives. Where do you want to go? What do you want to achieve? And then don't stress, but take one step at a time. And I've been surprised of how powerful that process is. And then you meet a lot of great people along the way, new opportunities open up. Like one of my role models and mentors for many times said that don't take choices that close doors, take choices that open doors. And at least I think that as both for active founders in the company, what we another great exercise that we challenge founders on startups is, and I think this is a challenge that would apply for every human being, is try to ask yourself the question, what's your 1% top scenario? And it's a really cool exercise, because then you're not allowed to doubt yourself, or because this is the 1% top scenario in the universe that can happen to you. And I think that's an important exercise, and I think that's maybe one thing we should train, especially Norwegians should train much more on. And then of course it's not being naive about, okay, everyone can say they want to be a world champion or build a unicorn. Of course it's not that easy, but I think we see too many founders with a massive skill set, great domain expertise. They have the drive and the grit to really make fantastic things happen, but they just set the bar way too low. And I think that's also a reflection and a discussion I had with, or a reflection Carl had prior to Oda. He had a company called Evacuate, which was a wristband with a flashlight on for use in emergency settings. And he's like, it was much more struggle and much harder to get that company off the ground than to get Oda off the ground. And I think that's also, people tend to think that it's so much harder to succeed with building a global company versus having a successful restaurant on the corner of Karl Johan. I think if you look at the amount of work you have to put in, it's the same amount of blood, sweat and tears.
What is your top 1% scenario?
Glad you asked. I think that was also an important reflection, that when we challenge both our portfolio companies and founders coming to us about this challenge, you need to take your own medicine. I think talking about the pivot from Oda to Skyfall, I felt it was important for me to have a purpose, because I'm pretty purpose driven. And what I saw early on with Skyfall was that we had been able to create trust in the capital markets, so that investors relied on, or trusted us in order to allocate capital on their behalf. And then I think a lot of our investors, they haven't invested that much in startups before, or not that much in funds. So I know that if Skyfall wouldn't be there, the majority of the capital we manage today wouldn't be accessible for founders. And that's a big problem. And also spent a lot of time thinking about, okay, what's this 1% top scenario? And I think it can always change, and it's a dynamic, in a way, target. But it's this cliche, like talking about what should we do in Norway after oil and gas. We mentioned it a bit earlier, but I saw this graph where you have the revenues coming from oil and gas compared to all other like big income sources in Norway. And then you see like the predictions on production and sales of oil and gas. That's one thing, but I spend a lot of time looking into the crystal ball. How will the world, what's a plausible future in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years? And we're discussing in Norway, or someone is discussing whether we should put the end date of oil and gas ourselves. I'm pretty sure that it's not up to us. It's up to innovators, creating new energy sources that will suddenly be here. So, and just reflecting on that graph, thinking about my 3 sons growing up now, try to imagine Norway in 10 to 15 years, I suddenly got really petrified. Because they're talking about, okay, how can we make Norway like the best country to start a company in? I don't think that's the question. We have had the ability to say that we're one of the best countries to live in the world, and we probably still are. But for me, this is a question whether we can still say in 10 to 15 years that Norway is one of the best countries to live in the world. And you see too many signs that we're I like to frame it. It's a bit dramatical, but the signs that indicates that we're heading towards becoming like the Nokia of nations, they're there. And I think we have to change. And what makes me optimistic is that I work with such a beautiful gang of superstars, entrepreneurs, and they have the ability to create fantastic companies, utilize the massively acceleration of cool technology. And I know that if we're able to keep on building the ecosystem in Norway, making sure capital is available for these people, making sure we're building role models, that we're able to share the competence and build a strong ecosystem, then I'm quite optimistic.
So this is what really inspires you when you wake up in the morning, and it's your personal mission, you can say.
For me, in a way, I see that with what we do in Skyfall, we could together with other investors, but also with founders and the rest of the ecosystem, build like what I like to call the new Norway. And I think for me, that's one of the most important things I can contribute to now, the coming 5 to 10 years, to make sure that we have this flywheel, the catalysts, the ecosystem that enables us to create all these fantastic companies that we need to create. And what I know is that we have the talent in this country. And I also know that building companies is not for everyone, but we need to make sure that those with the ability and the drive to really build great companies should feel that this is their calling. I in a way try to set some numbers on it, and just to contextualize it, it's if you take out oil and gas per now, we have an export deficit on around 400 million Norwegian kroners. That's a pretty good number. That's the gap we need to fill. And in a way, when I try to visualize my targets, okay, how can we use Skyfall Venture as a vehicle to contribute to us filling that gap, which I think is a pretty hairy and cool goal. But when I talk to talented people about this, especially young Norwegians, they say, this is our responsibility. And I think that's also one, this is not about my goal and Jon Kåre's goal. This is the responsibility of a whole generation. If we want to continue having the life quality and the society and this, as I said, to be able to say that this is the best country to live in, then we all need to start working. And I think that's maybe the most motivating part of this, because I see that with my background, having been part of Oda, also now building Skyfall Ventures, you in a way to have the position to influence people, you have the position to motivate people. And I think now understanding that I'm above 40, I'm not young and promising anymore, I'm suddenly an adult, then you have to stop complaining, because now it's up to us. So I think feeling the passion to go out and make people responsible is part of that goal frame and my ambitions, and it's really cool.
Like, if you can compare, how was building a startup compared to building an investment company? What was the main challenge, maybe one of the main challenges you met when you started to build Skyfall Ventures?
I think I have to just talking about lifting people. I just have to lift Espen, the managing partner in Skyfall Ventures, and the job is done, because it's a really incredible journey. But I think it's a bit about what we've said is that we need to take step by step. Don't rush. Just make sure we take a next step that is challenging, but we also have the credibility. But still, we're a bit out of our comfort zone. We know that we're not resting, not being complacent, that we're growing. So I think that was a bit when we started, almost like looking for problem solution fit. The first things we did with under the Skyfall umbrella was try to start the company, or we started the company together with an incumbent. because we had the network with we could put on a managing director, we had connections with software engineers, and they had the domain expertise and stuff. So we've experienced with that. In combination, we did some investment, and then we thought, okay, we could be a startup studio because we can do so many things. But then suddenly you saw that, okay, if we're able to invest in people that really doesn't need our help, that's a smart investment decision. That journey has been important to take like step by step, but also search. Like the first investments we did was first initial angel tickets, and then we tied it together and did investments through single purpose vehicles. And I think an important part here is you have to build a brand, you have to build trustability. I think it's a lot of commons with building a startup. I mean, then you need customers, you need investors as well. You need to find out how to mix that product. And what we have built is it's a financial product. So I think those similarities are the same. But I think one of the tricky parts about getting started with venture is that you need to start invest. And I think for us I was part of the founding team in Oda, so I had my shares there, but my colleagues and co-partners in Skyfall Ventures were the first investors into Oda, or one of the first investors into Oda. And really early on into Otovo, early on into Nabobil. So I think that's also a bit of luck, because there's a saying, to have success in ventures, you need to have success in venture. There are some unfair competitive advantages in the venture dynamic, where if you start to have success, it's easier to attract the best founders, and then it's easier to attract the best investors, and so you have that flywheel. So I do think, but that experience we had from doing some pretty cool investments early on also helped us. In a way, it helped us on the vanity in terms of the logos on the wall, but even more important, and I hope that's something that we're able to also utilize as investors, is that you work with people that are able to do magnificent things. So you start to recognize patterns on what kind of personalities, what kind of do's and don'ts. So all these things, I think that's, for us, has been the most valuable part. For my part, being able to work together with 9 fantastic co-founders, but also now work close with founders in our portfolio companies that, in my eyes, are some of the very, very best founders in Norway. So I think, I don't know if it was a concrete answer to your question, but I think it was building step by step. What's the next step we could take, should take, but also how do we build the trust, both towards founders and also towards investors, to actually have credibility to say that this is what we want to do. We really do mean that we are well positioned, that we have the skill set in order to do this in a good job.
I wanted to ask you about the culture.
Yep.
Company culture. You've been in a startup and you played a pretty significant role there, right? Through your different roles at Oda, around culture and people, if I remember correctly, but also Skyfall Ventures and the culture you have in now your team, and how you influence that to your founders. So what is company culture to you?
I think company culture is a necessity. A strong company culture is a necessity in order to succeed. And I think one of the things I'm most proud of, being part of building Oda, is that the culture we set out to create in the very first days is still very strong, living in the company as part of the DNA. And I always say to founders, don't think you can build culture later on. You have to build it from day one. And I think just discussing how do we want to work together, what's our ambitions, how do we treat people, it needs to be something that's in place from the very get-go, because it's so hard to try to define it and do something with it later on. And I think this is something I've been reflecting on a lot, and it's like, how do you build culture? Culture can very often be something fluffy, that it's a bit intangible and hard to define. But I think I've learned that the way you speak to people, the routines you have on how you communicate, the way you set your ambitions, the arenas you have. Like, for example, in Oda at the warehouse, we had, for the operative teams, they had 3 meetings every day. Mm-hmm. One prior to the shift, one mid-shift, one later in the shift. And people can think that this is like a tool to just be in place to manage operation. But for me, this is a really important, or it's an example of a really important cultural arena. Okay, why? Because in that meeting, you talk about what we're going to do, so you share, you have openness about everything in the company, you lift the problems and you challenge the people in the first line to solve the problems. You bring in data and help so that people have assistance in order to excel. We talk about operational excellence. It's not about getting through the day, it's about getting through the day in the best way. Another example is, the great thing about Oda was that we had a lot of software engineers. And they were working tightly with operational people. So the ones sitting at the driving office, coordinating all the drivers, they knew that if it was something in their like back-end systems that wasn't functioning, or they had some requests, the way to the software engineer was really short. If they wanted to know which driver had what kind of performance, in order to know, okay, who should be responsible for training or stuff like that, then they had that data in place. And just having these things in place as pretty concrete aspects created a culture where people are thinking about continuous improvement. They're in a way empowered to do something if things doesn't work. If the systems are shitty, they will feel empowered to say, okay, we need to do something here, and you actually have the ability to fix it. And I've been reflecting on, then we start to create, instead of you having a small team responsible of improvements in the company, you suddenly have all 500 at the warehouse, and the 300 drivers are constantly improving the company based on culture. And I spend a lot of time with founders. Okay, you need to find these arenas, these concrete aspects, and put them in place. And okay, yes, they're practical in order to get the business running, but they're also very, very strong cultural tools and mechanisms in order to build the culture. And I think when shit hits the fan, or when you really need to be out there and fighting, if you don't have that culture with you, you have no chance.
Another question about you. So you have a big ambition and a mission and a lot to do on the journey. How do you make sure you have energy for doing all of these things? How do you take care of yourself? We know you're running with your friends. What else?
No, I think for me it's all about, in a way, hacking your everyday life. My kids go cross-country skiing, and when I drive them to training, it's the perfect time to go out running in the forest with my dog. We have at least one weekly training session with the team. Both great for culture building and team building, but it's also very healthy. I think sleep is very, very important. So I'm really eager to get 7 to 8 hours sleep every day. But then I think one of my biggest learnings from the 30s and from the other journey was that what really tears you down is doing the things that drains your energy level. And of course, sometimes you have to do things that's not the most funny part. But in general, how can you set up your life in a way that you're doing things that gives energy and energize you. And I've been in situations where you're really not in a good place because there's too many things. One founder I talked to yesterday said it, when you have a lot of responsibility but doesn't really have the power or energy to affect your responsibility, that's when you're in a bad place. And I think for a lot of young people, young and hopeful, aspiring people that has been used to managing a lot, and the expectation is that I'm going to do everything and I'm going to succeed with everything. And then suddenly when things get going a bit too tough, you see that that's not possible. And for me to really understand how do you set up both in a personal aspect, but also with your colleagues, that you have colleagues that fills out your blank spots, you're complementary, and that you have a job that energizes you. I think that for me is the most important thing, because when I'm there, you can really keep going it for a long time.
Do you know what gives you energy?
Working with massively ambitious and really talented, competent people that are so eager to really succeed with what they know that they have ability to succeed with. I love diving into the future, thinking about the plausible tomorrow in order to how can we utilize technology to create a much better place for everyone. I love the promise about abundance for everyone, both when it comes to intelligence with AI and energy with fusion and all these kinds of things. And being where I'm now, where we can invest in fantastic people, utilizing technology in order to create abundance and prosperity for humankind, and at the same time save Norway, that's a pretty energizing place to be.
What about your portfolio companies? Do you support them in terms of like supporting their mental health and sharing that knowledge with them and talking of importance of well-being and taking care of themselves?
I think that's an aspect that we take seriously. Our follow-up with portfolio companies, it's a bit, it's like no standard. So I think it relies a lot on relations, relies a lot on where do we see that we can, we're a pretty small team, so where do we see that we can give a lot of value with not that much effort. But I think the toughest times in Oda, talking about naive, okay, I was the COO, we grew 7% a week, my third kid on the way, bought a house that was going to be refurnished. Not maybe the best risk handling activities, but having been in such situations as well, having felt to push the limit too far, but also been in situations where you're not sure if you're going to raise money, you're not sure if you're like going to get through summer on the liquidity wise. I think having been in that situation, you start to know people and you start to see it in people when they're not in a good place. And when I see that, I'm pretty quick with, okay, let's have a talk. I don't know if you noticed, but what I see in Ian now is something I've seen before. It's not a good thing. And I hope that for our portfolio companies to have investors that value these kinds of things as well.